everybody should have gotten a red Kegger Solo cup coming in. Everybody get one of those? No Kegger here today. Sorry about that. But we're going to do something with these later, and there are Sharpie pens either on the tables or in the back of the chairs, certain places. So I'll get to that in a moment. I just want to make sure everybody got one of the cups. All right, let's roll the video, Gordon, and I'll be with you in about 10 minutes.
Or my Farm League team. I'm looking for just one or two of the kids who want to go not just agree with Jesus, but go do stuff. Take the next step.
We'll do that again. Thanks.
I teach a class at the local university. I've been doing it for years, and it's just a blast. It's business law, and everybody has to take it. But you know the reason I do it? I love to teach, but really these kids are my Farm League team. I'm looking for just one or two of the kids who want to go not just agree with Jesus, but go do stuff. Take the next step. And I don't know what the next step for them is, but you can see it in somebody's eyes. You remember that time where you felt that? You just knew what was next for you. It was a little murky, but you just knew this was the time. There was a guy like that. He had that look in his eye, and his name was John. John was in up the fourth row of the class, and after one of the classes was over, he asked me if I wanted to come over, and we actually sat by a fire like this, and as we were stirring the coals, we were kind of seeing how God was stirring his heart. He had this desire to go do the next thing, and I just told him, man, spin the globe. Like anywhere where God's people are, where the hurting are, I mean, that's a place to jump in, and I'll jump with you. Let's just do this thing. So we picked Uganda. Uganda is this country, if you followed what's happened, there's been this 25-year civil war. Between the Civil War and AIDS, you know what the average age for the entire country was at the time? 15 years old. Isn't that nuts? It's a nation of children. And I don't know all the steps, and Jesus doesn't lay out all the steps, because this isn't a business trip he's inviting us on. He said, like, just follow me, and we'll go do stuff. And that's the problem I have. As a matter of fact, the first time I went to Uganda, I went to a village, and as I was leaving the village, there's a couple kids running after the Jeep, right? So I waved to them, and now there's like 5 kids running, and I'm waving a little faster. There's like 15 kids, so I get both hands going. And there's 30 kids running after the Jeep, and I leaned over to the driver, and I said, what's the deal? And in the U.S., this means like, hi, right? In Uganda, this means follow me. Isn't that great? And I think Jesus has been doing that to me. He says, Bob, follow me. And I keep waving to him, saying hi. And a guy like John just decided he didn't want to just wave at Jesus anymore. So we got to Uganda, and I don't know where to start, but I know that Jesus loves justice. He's nuts about kids. He doesn't seem to like lawyers like me very much, but he loves justice and he loves kids. And so we just started going to jails, and we started finding kids. If you're a dad in Uganda and you don't want some guy's son to hang out with your daughter, you accuse him of defilement. And that day he goes to prison. Isn't that crazy? And 3 years later, he's still sitting in that prison, never having stepped foot in a courtroom. And I was thinking, this is nuts. These kids need to have access to justice like everybody else. So we started trying cases. We brought the first 100 cases to trial of these juveniles who were in these jails, and we dropped off 98 kids at home with all the charges resolved. It wrecked my career, because all I wanted to do is do that. And John just said, like, let's go start a school. And so we did. And we didn't just start it in the capital. We went to northern Uganda. It's the epicenter of the Civil War. On the one hand, the Lord's Resistance Army, and on the other hand, the Ugandan military. And what's nuts about this is these two sides each wore the same uniform. Is that crazy? The only cars going up in the north at the time were these UN cars, and they were all bulletproof. We had a Tercel, and we just went as fast as we could. There would be checkpoints, and everybody had machine guns, and we just blew by all of them, because if you stop, it's going to be a real problem. So we got to Gulu in the north, and then even started going north from there, and we said, what if we start a school? So we got the word out to hundreds of thousands of young Ugandans that a school was coming in. We were going to call it the Restore Leadership Academy. And tuition was free. You could just come. And when opening day came, we were so excited. We couldn't wait to see how many kids showed up. I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 kids? You know how many kids that showed up? 4. It was terrific. We weren't bummed. We were too busy chest bumping each other. We've got a school. Pretty soon we had 9 kids, then 19, then 90, and John called me up one day and said there's 2 students who are walking like 7 kilometers each way to get to school every day, and he wondered if there's any way we could just have 2 bunks at the school to put them up in. And I said, no way, man. I do not want to have a boarding school. Oprah had started hers. Things had gone wonky. I just didn't want that. And so I just kept saying no, and he said, but Bob, I just need 2 bunks. I don't know if he did this Jedi thing or what, but pretty soon I found myself just saying, okay, John, 2 bunks, but that's it. It's a couple years later. You know how many kids are at our school? 310. You know how many are in bunk beds? 310. And you know what we've been calling John? 2-Bunk John ever since, because that's the way people who aren't just waving at Jesus anymore, people that just connect and say, there's just got to be more we can do. They just they defy the rules. They just say, no, I'm going to jump the tracks. I'm not going to do what's typical anymore. I'm not going to think small. I'm going to think big. This school has students that take a national exam. There's actually 13 subjects that they test every year. Physics, chemistry, English. I mean, it's a rigorous exam. And we were thinking with these kids that had been former child soldiers, how many of them would have a shot at passing? I don't know, like 1 or 2 maybe would pass, but the rest would fail. You know, we got the test results back. Every single one passed. In fact, this Restore Leadership Academy is the #1 school in all of northern Uganda. It's crazy, and you know why? A guy named 2-Bunk John, a guy sitting in row 4 in a classroom that just said, I just want to take the next step. I just want to do something audacious, and then I'm not going to be limited in my love. I'm going to love like I'm made of this stuff. There's a kid named Obama. And Obama came to us the day after his parents were dragged from the hut they were living in and burned alive in front of him. Can you imagine? I mean, what would that be like for me or for you to have like that unfold in front of us? But that didn't stop Obama. And in fact, he's a lot like 2-Bunk in that way. Because Obama went through our school, and you know who the valedictorian of our school was this year? Obama. You know where Obama's going? He's going to law school. You know where 2-Bunk John is? He's going to law school too. Isn't that mind-blowing? Why does God do that stuff? You know why? Because he wants to blow our minds. He wants to blow our minds with how good he is. How about his ideas for us are so huge. And what we need to do is just take the next step. So what's your next step? What's your next big idea? Something you've been thinking about. What's your 2-Bunk move? Where you've said, like, if I could just do this thing, we'd be off. And I'm just saying, like, could we just go do that? I got a call from a publisher, and they said, would you write a book? And I said, I don't know, will you build a school? And they said, how big's the school? I said, 310 child soldiers and 40 teachers. And they said, big school? I said, big book, right? And so this was the caper. We said, let's just give all the money to the school. We'll go build a whole school for these kids. And we did. You know, we got to the last page of this book, and I was thinking about how Jesus got more available as time went by, and I was kind of getting less available. And I thought, what if I put my cell phone number on the last page of the book? And they thought I was nuts. And so I said, well, now we have to. You guys, there's a couple 100,000 people that have my cell phone number. Isn't that terrific? I get 50 calls a day. It's great. I can't get anything done because I don't send anybody to voicemail? What if we're the ones that just aren't efficient with our love anymore? Right? I mean, we keep telling people you can talk to God anytime, anywhere, about anything. And we keep screening our calls. What if Jesus started screening mine? Have you ever gotten one of those calls that's like a message that's 4 minutes and 30 seconds long, and you're like, dude, get to the point. If Jesus started screening my calls, he'd realize, man, there's no point. I just wanted to talk. What if we're like that? We just say, man, we're just available. What if we're really inefficient with our love? And our goal is to be more and more inefficient as time goes by. I stood with Two-Bunk John. We looked out over 50 acres, and we pointed at what could be perhaps the launching point of the next generation of leaders for Uganda. And the Restore Leadership Academy now is in the north, and kids are emerging from this academy. They're going into politics, they're going to law school. There's 25 kids that are in the universities right now. You know why? Because you became part of this. We just had this big idea. We'll write a book, we'll do something terrific, we'll meet guys like Two-Bunk. We're all part of it, we're all co-conspirators. And that's this thing that Jesus invites us to. He doesn't invite us to an organization. He didn't have one, and we don't want to have one either. We just want to be part of this like movement of people that say, we want to know more about God. We don't want to just wave to Jesus, we want to follow him. And following him means taking the next step. So what's yours? What's your next step? What's your Two-Bunk idea? And what's the next step to get you there? And man, if you need some help figuring it out, give me a call. You know I'll answer.
Good stuff. All right, so let me talk about the cup, and then I'm going to get into what this whole Jesus following thing is about, because that's his challenge to us. Just so happened, these are the cups from the first service. They'd already did the exercise, and I moved what they did in there out here, pretty much like they had it in there. So on your red cup, you're going to have like 3 columns you're going to write on. In one area, you're going to write God, and underneath that, what I want you to put are the most compelling things or attributes of God for you. So when you think about the character and nature of God, which ones really stand out to you? They're like your top 3. I mean, we could go on for days about attributes of God, right? I'm trying to figure out which ones bubble to the surface for you, which ones really, really mean the most to you. You got it? So like for me, mercy, love, and compassion. Those were huge on my God character list. There's all kinds of other stuff, but those 3 really spoke to me. And you can do this now, or you can do this while I'm talking so you don't have to pay attention to me. It's whatever you want to do. And then in another part of the cup, maybe a third of the way around, I want you to write your name. So I wrote my name, and I didn't do this in the first service. So what I want you to write there, I want you to brag a little bit about yourself. What are you good at? What are things that you can do? Maybe you're good with your hands and skilled with that kind of stuff, tools and that. Maybe you're a good thinker, leadership thinker. Maybe you're good, I don't know, what it could possibly be. Could be 100 different things. Maybe you're really good at praying, and so you want to do that. So for me, I'll put, just to be honest, Pete, and I have a big mouth. Right? So I have a big mouth, I talk a lot, and maybe I can use my big mouth for something for the kingdom of God. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And then on the BHAG, or on the next thing, you're going to write 4 letters. B-H-A-G. B-H-A-G. Those of you who've been in marketing or business, you know what this stands for. It's an old acronym. Stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goals. So what I want you to be thinking about as you scribble some stuff in there, and again, you don't have to do it right now, but you're going to be doing something with it later, so you've got about 15 minutes or so to figure it out. This is what's burning a fire in your belly. What's a big thing you'd really like to see done? You know, maybe in our community, you know, with our food ministry or something, you're like, wow, I'm really passionate about our food ministry. Maybe your thing's prayer, so you're thinking, wow, I would really like to see our prayer ministry. I'd really like to be a part of that and get people prayed for that don't even know they need prayed for yet, that kind of thing. Or maybe when you heard about his Uganda story, you're thinking about our Faraha story, and you're like, wow, I just want to get more involved in that and do something there, or with domestic violence issues, or I don't know what it is, but what's burning a fire in your belly? What are you just passionate about, where every time that subject comes up, there's something stirs in you and like, I got to do something about that. Okay? So you kind of got the idea there. All right, you can just put that aside for a while, and I'll come back to that in a bit. So, you know, he says, Bob Goss talks about, Jesus doing this, and it's a sign to say, follow me. And we tend to think he's just doing this, but he's really inviting us to follow. So I was thinking about that. What does that really mean? And before we get all excited with Bob Goff, because Bob Goff is so positive, like anything he says or anything he asks us to do, it's so easy just to say, yeah, I'll do that just because you're so positive. But sometimes I wonder if we get 10 steps into it and we're like, oh man, this is not at all what I expected this to be like. And I started to think about that for my own life, and I started to think about that for my colleagues, other pastors in the United States. And I'd kind of heard some stuff before, and so I just wanted to verify some of the things I heard. So I just Googled pastoral statistics. And the site came up. I put a hyperlink on it on my blog that'll publish at 12 or so today. And this whole page comes up of some really awful statistics. One of them is that 80% of pastors in the United States struggle with depression regularly. 80% of pastors' wives want them to find a different job. About 90% of pastors, I think this is right, I might have my numbers right, but it's still shocking either way. It's either, I think it's within 5 or for sure 10 years, 90% of people who became a pastor left being a pastor. Which that's a big deal, because you got to get a master's degree to get to do what I do. So you're cashing in a lot, and it's not like my Master of Divinity is a highly marketable skill in other fields, right? I'm really well equipped to do this. And so for them to walk away, that's pretty significant. A lot of other things that just say there's something going on here, and I think probably because I know the role. I've been doing this, I got my Rev 20 years ago, so I know a thing or two about it, and I kind of understand why, because pastors have dreams, about what it's going to be like. And usually those dreams are fairly lofty, and we have high ideals. Oh, it's just going to be great. It's going to be like church camp, and we're going to go in, and everybody's going to love each other, and we're just going to save the world, kind of a thing. But here's the deal. Churches are filled with people. People tend to be very human. And when human beings are not comfortable in their lives, we're not always at our best. And the thing is, the church is an open door for people who are uncomfortable, right? Who aren't doing great, and they're looking for hope and strength and guidance. And so when they come in, sometimes those are real messy. And sometimes that gets difficult. Sometimes pastors, I don't know what kind, but sometimes pastors like to initiate change in a church. And when change happens, that makes people uncomfortable. And when people get uncomfortable, they get unsettled and sometimes don't behave the way that they wish they could. And so a lot of pastors find out that the dream that they thought was there isn't really the reality. And they can't take it after a while. And they bail in droves. In fact, there's a leadership crisis in churches now. You're going to have a lot of churches in the United States just flat out close up, because there aren't enough leaders to fill them. We deal with that in our region right now. We scour the entire country looking for good leaders because there's just not a big farm team that's coming up. So I started to think about my own life as a pastor. And I could certainly tell a few tales. There were I got some whoppers, man. Going back to the Midwest, some of the crazy stuff that we went through back there. I would tell you some of these stories and you'd be like, no way that happened. I'd say, call this person and find out. Because they're just so off the charts crazy that this stuff happens. I mean, it's just nuts. I had a friend today, actually just yesterday, talking about a leadership thing that's just going sideways with him. And he's got like 2 leaders in the church that just want him out. And they're kind of doing stuff underhanded. So they called a special meeting that probably wasn't legal, and they fired him illegally. So they've told him, you only got 30 days left, but it's not really official, but it's kind of official because they're leaders of the church. But you know what they did? They changed the locks on the church this week. So the pastor can't even get into the church. Don't get any ideas, people, all right? I mean, this kind of crazy stuff's happening, and my friend is just dying inside. He's like, man, I want to go and lead and do my thing, but this is so disheartening and all this stuff. So I've got some stories like that. I've got some stories where I totally blew it. And I did some stupid things and just was a bad leader in different respects, and it hurt people. And I don't feel good about that at all. And that causes pain that's actually much deeper than when people come sideways at me anyway. But, the stuff I've been thinking about recently about what does this following Jesus thing look like, and what's the fine print, has to do with something else. So about 10 years ago, I almost quit. Because it was just hard, and I decided before I quit, I've told the story before, but I wanted to finish my doctorate up, and I decided I was going to finish my doctoral focus on what this thing's really all about. So I went very deep in the study of soteriology, which is a fancy word for salvation. I really wanted to understand what is this thing God is trying to offer us from cover to cover in the Bible. When I found out just how big and beautiful, and more beautiful than is often talked about, that was, it totally recaptivated me, lit my faith up, and I've been, fired up about it ever since. You can't get me to stop talking about this subject if you get me started, because it's so beautiful and so big and captivating and compelling. But when I studied it, I also realized that a lot of this stuff has been in the books, and a lot of what is talked about from pulpits or stages, it's not like they're not talking about what's in their own research books. And I was like, well, I wonder what else is in those books that a lot of guys just aren't paying attention to. And we don't pay attention to stuff because we think we've already got it figured out. But when we figure out that we might not have it figured out, see what I'm saying? You kind of want to find out what you don't know. And so I started to look at a bunch of other things, a bunch of other subjects, and it started to really stretch my thinking about who God is and what this whole thing is all about. And that is terrifying at times. You know why? Because anytime we go through a major change like that, when it's a major transition, we know we're letting go of something over here. And we know we're headed to something over there. And so we let go, because we can't take that there. And so we let go of this way of thinking, this way of being, whatever, and for a while it's in limbo land. Now you're not quite sure where it's going to go, and there's a lot of anxiety with it. This, by the way, is normal human stuff, isn't it? When we go through major changes in our life, it's true for all significant relationships. There are phases of relationship. Lynn and I have been married for 23 years, and we're a different couple now, a much richer couple, I think, than when we just started out. There are some things that we knew we need to let go of some of these behaviors and attitudes as we move forward. And sometimes, especially as we're moving into our kids getting older and, one's already gone and the other one we can't wait to get rid of. It's just and I love you. I'm kidding. All right. So anyway, that's transition for us. And we have friends that have moved from working all the time to retirement, and those transitions are foggy. And that's how it is with our faith. If we keep growing in our relationship with God, there had better be these moments. Because if that never happens, it means that the relationship stopped growing. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I think we should expect in our relationship with God, is there are going to be moments where we feel like we're just totally nailing it, and then God's going to stretch us some more. So I just want to reveal a little bit more about who I am and what it means to be walking with me. And at that moment, we're like, oh, that does not fit in my box anymore. And we have to let go of some, Paul calls them childish things, because we're turning into an adult in our faith. Any of you ever walked the Golden Gate Bridge? All right, a few of you. One time I walked the Golden Gate Bridge, started from the Marin side, walked all the way across, and it was this beautiful, clear day, not a cloud in the sky. I goofed around a little bit on the San Francisco side of the bridge and read some stuff, probably bought an ice cream cone, knowing me, and then I started to head back. But by this time, the fog started to roll in. It was the creepiest thing. So I just walked on this bridge. I was very confident that the bridge was still there, but as I'm walking on the bridge, I look up, and all I see is fog. I can't see those pillars anymore to save my life. And even though I knew the bridge was still there, there's this weird anxiety that comes out. You're like, I think it's still there. Because I hadn't seen any cars come by for a while. I'm like, wait a minute, did I miss something? You know, and it's this terrifying reality. I think that's how faith is at times. As we're called forward into something, we can't quite see where it's going. We're confident that it's going to be there. And for me, that's the character and nature of God. I'm confident that God is good, that God is loving, that God is compassionate. And so that's the bridge that I know is there. But how that's going to manifest itself and where it's going, it's foggy for a while. And after a while, you look back to the back and you can't even see that anymore. You can't see forward. And I think that's how faith sometimes feels. And so if we know that going in, I think that helps us a little bit. Because we could get trapped into an idea that if we just say yes to Jesus, it's all going to be peaches and cream. And it's all going to be wonderful. And if we feel any anxiety, it means we're not being good, faithful people. Because if we just had more faith, we wouldn't feel that. And I'm saying that's baloney. I'm saying it's just the opposite. Being people of faith means we choose to go into the fog, knowing that there's God to discover more and more our whole life, and it's worth it. But I started to wonder, if we could go back and just listen in to some of the things that the early disciples said, I wonder what they would say. So the next slide gives us a few of those that I think showed up. I'm confident that they at least entertained some of these ideas in their mind if they didn't say them out loud to each other. I'm certain of it, because this is what it looks like when you follow Jesus. It's confusing at times. It's weird at times. And so that made me think, well, gosh, why would anybody want to follow Jesus then? Let me clue you into something. You may not say yes to following Jesus, but you've said yes to following something. Most of us, we very naturally, we're hardwired to say yes to following me, ourself, to build our own little kingdom, to do the best we can with what we got, which is a wonderful, noble activity. It's a good thing to try to be the best person you can be, to be the most loving parent you can be, to be a loving, faithful spouse. It's a good thing to exercise your gifts and skills in the workplace and all that, and do as best as you can. Whatever your skill set is, that's a very good thing. To raise a family, to have stability, all those things are wonderful things that we do for ourselves, which are noble and good. But that's not following Jesus. Following Jesus wraps all that up. You get that in the bargain of something bigger. When we say yes to following Jesus, we are about a bigger thing, a bigger kingdom than our own. And we get the stuff we desire for ourselves in the bargain. Maybe different than we thought, but still there. Jesus didn't say, follow me and I'll give you a terrible life. You're going to hate it. No, he said, follow me because I came to give life in abundance. So God's very aware that, we want to have a life that's worth living. And the disciples probably didn't realize that saying yes to Jesus was going to mean tension and fog and confusion along the way. But I think a little bit later, I think they started to find it. Jacob, we've been talking about him for a few weeks. Jacob is one of these characters that boy, did he ever experience it. He had to follow me, right? His follow me was from God, the voice of God that was delivered first through his grandpa Abraham and said, I want to do this whole new nation thing with you. And so Jacob was told that from a young age by his father Isaac. You remember Isaac favored his barely older brother, twin brother Esau. And that drove Jacob nuts for sure. Jacob was not, his name literally means deceiver, and he lived up to it. He got the birthright away from his older brother. Probably did not think that one through, because now for the next 20 or more years, he's not home anymore. He's run away because he's afraid of his brother Esau. Not what he was thinking. He makes his way back after all kinds of craziness, all the while thinking about, okay, I remember that ladder vision I had, and God said, I'm going to do this thing. I'm still with you. We're going to make this happen. But along the way, so much weird stuff. People being deceitful with him. His sister wives didn't always get along well. There was jealousy. One could have children like is going out of business. The other one couldn't. So all of a sudden their servants became his wives, and now he's got all that many more gifts to buy. I mean, it's just a really confusing time. And it was nuts. It was just absolutely crazy. And then by the time he gets settled back in the land, he meets Esau. Esau is, not wanting to kill him anymore. Esau welcomes him back, and it's a very good thing. And on you go, and you think, whew, got to the promised land. It's all going to be good. No, not so good. Because now the 12 brothers don't get along so well. In fact, crazy thing happens here. A curse continued. Jacob was afflicted with the curse that Isaac began. Isaac's curse was that he favored his older son Esau, and it was obvious. Jacob has a son named Joseph, who he favored over all the rest. And that's crazy, isn't it? And the brothers caught on to this, and they could not stand Joseph. So one day they're out milling around, and they decide to get rid of him. They can't kill him. Nobody had the courage to do that, although they almost did. So instead, they sold him into slavery in Egypt. But they told Dad that he died so they could be done with it. Crazy stuff. So now, poor Jacob is living with the mourning, the grief of losing his favorite son. I mean, it's unimaginable what he went through. And while that's happening, other crazy stuff's happening. One of his daughters is raped, and he's got to deal with that, and his sons kind of take matters in their own hand, and there's lots of bloodshed, and it's an ugly, ugly mess. One of his grandson's wife, the grandson passed away, and the wife was supposed to be getting taken care of, but his son wouldn't really do what he was supposed to do. So she took matters into her own hand, and there was weird prostitution and deceit happening for her to secure her place and future, and her husband's family line and all that. Just nutty stuff that was going on. It was just one big mess. And I think we just got to get comfortable with the reality that that's how it is. That's how life is. Life is one big chaotic mess. And your bodies will prove that, won't they? I've been humbled in the last couple of months that my body is not 20 years old anymore. And went water skiing up in northern Michigan, and I used to be able to cut it up all day long. Now all of a sudden, not all day long. I used to take falls, when I was slalom skiing around that, would make everybody gasp. They were surprised I got out of it. This time I took a very ordinary fall and was in severe pain for 3 weeks. It's like, man, what is going on here? Our bodies let us know your life is not your own. This is going to be a mess. Relationships are messy. Everything is messy. But the question then is, which follow me do we want to get messy with? Do we want to choose the me, myself, and I messy, which is going to look after our own and could work out pretty well? Or is there a bigger follow me to say yes to? That's going to get the one in the bargain, still going to be messy, but it's going to be towards something bigger than our own little life. This isn't the only thing I think that the disciples said. On the next screen, I think we see something else, and I'll read this one for you. Things Jesus' followers eventually said. The journey was not what we anticipated. We were stretched way out of our comfort zones. It was often difficult, and we weren't sure where it was going. We suffered a time or two. But the lepers were healed. The lame walked. The bleeding stopped. they could see. He refunded taxes. She walked away unstoned. The storm was calmed. The people ate. The judges went silent. The child lived. Hope followed us. Love won. Beauty replaced ashes. Strength replaced fear. Gladness transformed mourning. And peace wiped out fear. These are the kinds of things that Jesus' followers discover as they continue on. That they were not alone, that it was still messy, but that extraordinary things were happening because they said yes to follow me. So on the next slide, I've got some questions for you that are related to this cup. I think that Jesus is still inviting us with his follow me. And my question is what does this mean for you now, like literally right now? Where is the Spirit leading you? And as you think about that, I want you to trust that God is with you, for you, ahead of you, and bigger than you. So all of these cups, there are 46 up here, including mine. All of these cups represent people who already this morning, other crosswalkers, have already said, I'm willing to pour myself out for this. I'm willing to give my life to something bigger, because they did this on their way to something that you get to do too, which is communion on either end. There's a bucket there for offering in your info cards, and we need your support and appreciate that. But what's on those wine barrels is communion. And communion is the ultimate picture of God pouring God's self out. So you have a piece of cracker, which is symbolic of a broken body that was given, poured out for us. You have a cup, which is symbol of Jesus' blood shed, poured out for us. On one sense, to look at that and say forevermore, especially when we really put ourselves into the culture where they understood the need for sacrifice and all that, and appeasing God and all of that stuff, when we look at that, we get great hope. Because we recognize that what happened on a cross about that size says to us forevermore that we're okay with God, that God forgives us, that God loves us no matter what. And so that's part of what this represents, but it's also a model for us, because somebody carried that cross, and somebody hung on that cross, the same guy who said, follow me. And so we recognize that in the bread and in the cup, we see the model we're to follow, which is to pour out our lives for something bigger than ourselves, to say yes to this thing that God is trying to do. So here's my question for you. If you say yes to follow me, what would happen if that passion area, that BHAG that you put on there, what would happen if God really got behind that thing you're so passionate about? What would happen if we actually believed God would do such a thing? And not just on our own strength. You know, I've been here almost 16 years now, and you know, if you would have gotten around our leadership table 16 years ago and told us that twice a week we were going to be feeding fresh produce that we got for free to, you know, a line of people waiting on Mondays and Wednesdays just to come get food, and that we were going to be serving like 3 times as many people through our food pantry as we were at that time, and that we're also going to be feeding over 500 orphans in Kenya and helping out with this domestic violence shelter in T1 and all this stuff, I think everybody around that table would just say, we can't do that. And we would have been right, because we can't all by ourselves. But we're holding the hand of a very big God who can open doors and do stuff that we can't even imagine. And I'm asking you to step out and imagine what would happen to your life, what would happen to the world if we actually believed God was going to get behind the thing that we feel so passionate about. And would we be willing to pour ourselves out for what God has in store and just see what happens because we chose to be available? Your kingdom matters. Your little kingdom matters. Our lives matter. And God understands that. God will take care of that when you take care of His kingdom too. What are you going to choose to do? And then on a bigger thing, for next week, and I'm asking you as your pastor to do this, I'm asking you seriously to pray this week and wonder What could God do through Crosswalk that's bigger than Crosswalk can do all by itself? We've got a stable church. We do a lot of amazing things. But what if there were some dreams that we haven't entertained yet because we weren't sure if God was with us? I'm asking you to dream. What is possible here? Because I think if the Spirit really is working all among us, I think some themes are going to bubble up. And I want to know what those things are, and so does the leadership of this church. And we're going to see what God is bubbling in your hearts and start to dream big about what could God do through us to transform the world around us. I'm very excited about that. But for now, we're just talking about you and your cup. So you come forward in a moment. I'll lead us in prayer in a second. And I want you to build a pyramid. And if you knock them over, we have this videotaped. And we will share it. So be careful. So, and this is a representation, which I find just really inspiring. So your fellow crosswalkers have already led the way for you to say, I'm in. I'm willing to pour my life out and say yes to the follow me of Jesus. And I think their going forward before you is just all the more reason for you to say yes yourself. And let's see what happens in our lives, in our world, in our church, when we decide to say yes. So join me in prayer, and then you can come forward and do all this chaotic stuff. Let's pray together. So God, we just want to state it plainly. Life is chaotic. There's no getting around it. Even if we play it totally safe, it's just going to get messy now and again. You get that. But we have an invitation before you that I think your Spirit has been echoing ever since Jesus and all the way back to Abraham, that you're wanting to do a new thing. And that you're saying, follow me into this unknown territory, this thing that is terrifying, but it's all you. And you're inviting us to say yes to that, which requires faith and trust on our part, knowing ahead of time there's going to be some chaos involved and some uncomfort involved. Probably some frustration, some weariness. But if the Bible is our guide and the disciples show us what happens, there are also amazing things that you want to do in our lives and in the world that can get done because you're in it. So may we say yes to your follow me. And may we just strap in for the ride and celebrate what you're doing along the way and look to you for strength when it gets weird, knowing that you haven't left us. Be with us as we commune with you now. In Jesus' name, amen.